Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes hotter than pancakes. My name is Chris Conkling, your host, and as always, I'm joined by one of my best friends,
Brian Dupree. We're just a couple of deep divers diving deep with our special guest today.
Indeed. Yeah. Christian Katie's still on paternity leave for the next 6 weeks, I believe. However, it's not just Brian and I tonight, as Brian so sneakily just spoiled. We actually have a third, and we'd love to welcome to the Pop-O-Holics from Inside the Mind of a Blurred and C4S Villains, Steve. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. I'm so glad you guys decided to let me come on here, man. I've been a fan for a little while now. I'm late to the game, but ever since Kung Fu Month, that's been my little marker where I was like, okay, this is like a really, really great show. So I was all like, yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad you guys asked me to join.
We're super happy to have you. We've been talking about this for a while, trying to figure out when we want to get you on. So we're very glad that you finally said that you could join us. So what is Pop-O-Holics? Okay, every single week we sit down and we talk about the latest in pop culture and film news every Monday. We talk a little bit about what we've been consuming. Every Wednesday, we typically have a themed episode where we theme our month based around something in pop culture that's coming out that month. However, considering that Christian's still on paternity leave, Brian and I have decided to slim down the process. And for the next couple weeks, we've been talking about one singular thing in our quick hits section of our weekly upload, which is what you're watching right now. And this week, with Steve's help, we're going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett in its entirety. So we're super excited to do that. But as we do every week, we're going to kick things off with Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Welcome to the Wacky News Corner, everyone. We're starting it off with what I'd like to think is some good news. Hopefully it ends up being good news with a caveat. We will see. But Futurama has been renewed for a second time. So it's got its third home. Started off at Fox, moved on to Comedy Central after it got canceled, and is now getting a 20-episode run on Hulu. So we have the original creators, Matt Groening and David Cohen, who are here back signed on to the project. We also have most of the original voice cast with Billy West as Fry, Katie Seagal as Leela, as well as Tress MacNeille, Maurice LaMarche, Lauren Tom, Phil Lamar, and David Herman. John DiMaggio is maybe still in talks. Originally, they were saying he was still in talks to come back. Now it's seeming like the talks may be at a bit of a standstill with a first table read coming up very soon. Fans are backlashing and threatening to boycott this show if he's not brought back to play Bender. And I guess he played a couple other characters as well.
Yeah,
I have never been a diehard Futurama fan. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons as a young man, so I never really got huge into it. I've seen a handful of random episodes, but Futurama was something that in high school and college, I watched a good amount of random episodes, and every episode I saw, I enjoyed, even though I was never compelled to go back and watch from the beginning. It seems like the reception as the show went on was definitely more mixed as it got towards the end of the multiple seasons and the movies that they did. But when I brought this up to you guys, it sounded like you're both pretty excited about Futurama coming back. Steve, what's your history with this show and how do you feel about it coming back to Hulu?
So my history with it was really episode 1 when it first aired like a long time ago. I watched that first episode live as a kid.
Wow.
And I watched it and I was like, oh, okay, I love it. And then when the show got canceled or axed in Fox, I actually didn't know Futurama came back to Comedy Central till much later. So they were already 2 or 3 seasons in on Comedy Central. And every time I saw it on Comedy Central, I assumed that they were playing the reruns from Fox. So I had no idea. So then once someone's like, no, these are new episodes. So then I jumped into it. I binged it. And bro, Futurama is like one of those ones where a lot of people like Family Guy and American Dad and all those are their favorite, but Futurama is my favorite. it would be Futurama, and then it would probably be Archer as the next one for me, and then Bob's Burgers. So that's the order. But a lot of people have, Family Guy and was the South Park, things like that in their tops. But like for me, it's Futurama, Archer, and then Bob's Burgers for me. And Futurama is like really, really good. That's my show. So when you said it, I was like, oh, they're coming back. And then I immediately was like, well, good thing I got Paramount, because it will just come to Paramount. And you're like, oh, it's on Hulu. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, cool. That makes sense too. So I was like, cool. So we'll get 20 episodes on Hulu. And I know a lot of fans are boycotting it if they don't bring back the voice actor for Bender, because every time I hear, even when I hear Adventure Time, I hear Bender's voice. So, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily boycott it myself. I would watch it for nostalgic reasons and stuff like that. But I would still be kind of disappointed if he didn't return. It's not going to be the same without him, unless they get someone that's identical to his voice. But yeah, I would be disappointed, but I'm still going to watch it.
Even as someone who only watched it very irregularly, Bender was always someone that stood out as one of the key pivotal parts of the show. So I definitely get people being upset by that. Chris, how do you feel about this news?
Well, I just realized that Steve and I were watching television at the exact same time in 1999. Whoa. Because I also remember watching the first episode of Futurama as it aired live. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge Futurama fan. I've seen every single episode. I used to own all the DVDs. In 2007, when they announced that they were releasing all those straight to DVD films, I bought every single one of them. As a kid, I used to draw Bender obsessively because he was just easy to, an easy robot to draw, basically just like a cylinder, But I'm so happy that this show's coming back. And Steve and I were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but yes, John DiMaggio is in negotiations right now to come back as Bender, but I don't see a world in which, Disney doesn't say it will pay whatever you want, just come back, because I believe that's what it's coming down to right now. He's asking them for more money than they're willing to pay. Mm-hmm. But he's John DiMaggio. Like, he's been a voice actor for decades. Like, he's earned the right to get paid what he wants to get paid, especially for a character like Bender, which is so beloved, a foul-mouthed robot. So yeah, if he doesn't come back, like Steve, I really don't plan on boycotting the show, at least at the start. I'll probably watch the first episode just because I'm such a big fan. And we still have Billy West and Katie Seagal. So, I mean, 2/3 of the three main cast will be back. Mm-hmm. If it turns out he does end up getting replaced and Bender just sounds really weird, maybe I don't watch all the way through, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, I don't envision that they won't be able to work this out by the time they start recording the actual episodes.
Right. And I believe this is set to come out in 2023, and knowing Disney and Hulu, if it doesn't work out, maybe they will just put the old voice work into an AI and not need him anyway. And I'm sure that will go down very well. So yeah, that's Futurama that is getting rebooted for 20 episodes on Hulu coming in 2023. So I'm sure.
Brian, the good news is that Mark Hamill has already said on Twitter that he will not be auditioning for the role of fake Bender, as he put it. So at the very least, Mark Hamill won't be doing it, and they won't be recreating Mark Hamill's voice to fill in for John DiMaggio either. So
thank God for that. So the next piece of news, which definitely ties into what we're covering later on with the book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, a series that had been announced, I think sometime last year. And personally, I was not anticipating nearly as soon as this date that they announced. But the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is coming to Disney Plus on May 25th. Mm-hmm. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, originally played by Alec Guinness, and in the prequels played by Ewan McGregor, who is coming back to reprise this role, as well as Hayden Christensen. That may be good or bad, depending on your feelings on the prequel movies. But Hayden Christensen, has not been around in a long time. So I'm kind of excited to see him back on the small screen here, but in this role. I think maybe there could be a redemption of sorts, and we'll see about that. But we just watched the Book of Boba Fett. We'll get into our opinions on that in a bit. I'm not saying that I'm going to judge this entirely off of Book of Boba Fett, but I'm hoping that it is a step above and stands alone, even though it is characters that have been in a bunch of other movies. I hope they kind of branch off in a way, and it doesn't feel as similar to some of the other stuff that they've been doing. Steve, I know you've seen the prequels. I'm not sure how you feel about these characters, but are you excited for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show?
I actually am. And I am not one of the Hayden Christensen haters. I was excited about the news that he was going to be returning as Darth Vader. I actually like him in the Star Wars movies. I like him in Jumper. I don't know how people feel about Jumper, but I enjoyed Jumper. I enjoyed Awake. I'm not sure if you guys saw that movie.
Mm-mm.
So Awake he's basically having open heart surgery. And there's like 0.5% of people that when they get put under,
this sounds like my worst nightmare.
Yeah, they're actually awake. So
I remember when this came out and totally forgot that he was in it.
Bro, it's so good.
Wow. Okay.
And there's like 0.5% of people, apparently, they have surgeries and they're awake the entire time. They can actually feel everything. They're just stuck, like, you know what I'm saying?
My God.
That's what
terrifying.
the movie is about. But I enjoyed him in a lot of movies. So I was actually really shocked, you know what I'm saying, when they gave the news. I was like, okay, cool. He's going to be back and we'll get to see him reprise the role or whatever. So I'm actually excited about this. Once again, well, you guys know, we'll talk about it later, but I don't have the same problems that a lot of people, Star Wars fans, have.
Right.
With some of the movies and things like that. But yeah.
Right. Chris, what about you? How are you feeling about Obi-Wan Kenobi? If your background is any indicator, I got to imagine that you're kind of in the bag for this regardless.
You know, I tried to set it up for Book of Boba Fett just to show you how much Boba Fett merchandise I actually already own, and
It's
whether
impressive.
or not I'm super disappointed or not. Brian, I could not be more excited for this Obi-Wan Kenobi show. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually on Steve's show, C4S Villains, and we were talking about our most anticipated comic book shows of 2022. So I could not include this show in that list, but this is my most anticipated show for all of 2022. So the bar is set super high.
Wow.
Ewan McGregor is a phenomenal actor. He loves the Obi-Wan Kenobi character. Deborah Chow is going to be show running the entire thing, and she directed some of the best episodes of The Mandalorian. This is going to be a tight 6 episodes. They've been working on this script for a long time, so I can only imagine the quality of this particular show. And I just hope it's able to deliver, especially after the Book of Boba Fett. But we'll get into that later. Yeah, Hayden Christensen coming back is a major selling point as well. Mm-hmm. Hopefully he gets a little bit of redemption. I'm curious to see whether or not he is only going to be playing Vader, or if we're going to get some flashbacks with him as Anakin Skywalker. Maybe some de-aging, perhaps. Honestly, the guy really isn't aged much since he was in Star Wars. Like, he looks almost the same, so I don't think they'd have to do much. But yeah, I'm super excited. And from what I heard, this Vader's supposed to be more like the Rogue One Vader, so a little more aggressive, maybe a little angrier. I hear we're supposed to be getting a lot more physicality from this Vader than we've ever seen before. So take that as you will, maybe with a grain of salt. That's just rumor right now. But I mean, the hype level is all the way up here for this show. Let's hope I'm not disappointed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So yeah, pretty much right around the corner. That's Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's going to be airing on Disney Plus starting on May 25th. All right. Yeah, right around the corner. It's only a few months out at this point.
Airing on the 45th anniversary of Star Wars.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
May 25th. The original Star Wars day.
Okay.
Noted. I will catch up.
On the calendar. Oh yeah,
Before
Steve, you've done so much catching up. I feel like you've probably watched.
It's pretty
all
impressive. I cannot wait for you to tell everybody what you've done in the last week.
Honestly, my mind was blown. So moving into some stuff that's coming out this week. Coming to Netflix on Wednesday, we have Genius, a Kanye trilogy. So this is directed by Kudi and Chike and is about the life of artist, record producer, businessman, and fashion designer Kanye West. It's divided into three acts, three different movies, the first of which aired at Sundance just this year, and basically collects a bunch of documentary footage that has been collected over the last 2 decades around Kanye West. These two had worked with him from very early on, directing some of his most famous music videos. Through the Wire, I think, was the first one that they helped work on. And yeah, were very much involved with him from early on and saw him become who the world knows him to be. I know there has been a little bit of controversy from Kanye, who wanted a bit more creative control over this than he ultimately had. So I think this might be a more unbiased look than something that was explicitly produced by Kanye, and where he did have complete creative control.
And I think that's a positive thing.
I think so too, because regardless of how you feel about the man today, it's undeniable his influence on the culture, from hip hop through to fashion and many other things. So not going to step into all of the controversy, because that's me and Christian tried to do that very early on in the pod, and we've very much changed as a show since then for the better.
What an episode it was.
It was something. But
check that out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Pop-O-Holics. Look for our Kanye artist spotlight. It's there.
It is there. It's way back. Steve, just please. Just don't.
No, you should have said it. I've already put it in a mental note in my head.
Yes. Chris, I know you saw the trailer for this. What did you think of Genius?
I'm really excited for this show, Brian. I was a big fan of Kanye in college. The last album I thoroughly listened to multiple times, though, was Dark Twisted Fantasy. And after that, I really haven't listened to much of his work outside of the things that you've shared with Christian and I. We don't have to get into my opinions of Kanye the man at this point in time, but Chris is
definitely writing him in if he's not running in 2024 is basically what he's saying here.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about him. There's no denying, like you said, that the man is actually a genius. He's a musical genius. And despite what he does in his personal life and some of the problems he might have, he's impacted the industry in a giant way. And I'm excited for this documentary. I know you said that it is going to be more unbiased than Kanye would like for it to be. But again, like I said, that's a positive thing, I think. I want to know more about the real Kanye than this facade that he's put up over the course of the last decade. So I'm ready for this documentary. I'm going to be tuning in.
Heck yeah.
Actually, seen this trailer.
Oh, you have seen this trailer.
I didn't know this is what Genius was, but yeah, I've seen this trailer.
So what do you think of this? What do you think of this and Kanye?
I'm super excited. Kanye's as far as a producer, there's he's top 5 for sure for me, as far as hip hop and things like that. Just like how Chris said, it's a good thing that we're not getting a Kanye heavy influenced, documentary, because it's going to be more so of how great he is and things like that, where we're not going to see some of the other sides.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to get a lot of intimate sides that we didn't expect to see and things like that. We're going to find a little bit more than, what we would have saw if it was probably him. It'll probably be all positive. We'll get to see some of the negative, but it will give us a more understanding of Kanye the person, I feel like. But yeah, I'm super excited about this. I didn't even know this was coming out that soon. I thought this was coming out sometime in November or something like that, super later.
Yeah, it just premiered at Sundance, what feels like 3 weeks ago. I mean, it was maybe 3 weeks or a month ago that the first part premiered. And then, Netflix picked it up for apparently around $30 million. So they were clearly impressed with this. And yeah, they'll be putting that out on Wednesday. I'm not sure if all 3 are coming out at once. I believe that they are.
Are you sure? I think it's a weekly. I thought it was a weekly event.
Is it? Okay. You're probably right. So
don't quote me on that. It's either a weekly event or a 3-day event. But I know that they're going to be releasing like 1 episode at a time, basically. Sorry, listeners, I don't have the exact info on that.
No, I apologize. Bad news man here.
I like that concept of a weekly thing rather than giving you everything at once. Like, that was just me personally. With other TV shows and stuff, I enjoy the week to week. Everybody gets to talk about it for a week. Like,
it extends the discussion. It's great.
Yeah. Digest it a little bit before you just binge the whole thing.
Yeah, binging is cool if, like, per se, like, I'm behind on something, I haven't seen it in a couple years, and then, you know what I'm saying, oh, you haven't watched this? Well, watch it, and then boom. But if there's something that I can actually, like, you know what I'm saying, week to week discussions. I love the memes that go around for things in a week to week discussion. It gives you a lot of, you know, word of mouth, but that's just me personally. I know a lot of people do like to binge, but now you got to wait. You watch it all in one day, and then you got to wait 365 days or more for the next season. So,
right.
So I just want to, on that note, shout out C4S Villains again. Steve, co-host on that show for week-to-week content. This is the go-to for pop culture, comic book news. So definitely check that out for week-to-week. I know I was on for an episode of Peacemaker and had an amazing time. They've covered a bunch of they cover all the best shows. So go check out C4S Villains. But yeah, that's jeen-yuhs, a Kanye trilogy that's coming to Netflix on Wednesday. Moving on to something that's coming to Apple TV Plus this Friday, we have Severance. So the plot of this show is Mark Scout leads a team at Lumon Industries whose employees have undergone a severance procedure, which surgically divides their memories between their work and personal lives. This is created by Dan Erickson and directed by Ben Stiller and Aoife McArdle, and stars Adam Scott, Zach Cherry, Britt Lower, and many more. I don't know exactly what this show is going to be, but I'm very conceptually interested in it. And the trailer, even more so, made me excited to see this. I was a big Parks and Rec fan in college, watched the entirety of that series. So Adam Scott, decently big fan of. I watched a little bit of Chris, you're going to have to remind me. Party Down, which I believe also is getting a reboot, if I remember correctly.
I think we've talked about it multiple times in the news.
So Adam Scott, definitely quality actor, and this show looks pretty good. Apple TV Plus is putting out pretty consistently quality content these days. They're making themselves a pretty needed streaming service, I think, where it's consistently high bar of what they're putting out. Chris, you were able to watch this trailer?
I did.
What did you think of this show?
Conceptually, I'm in, just like you. Also, I love Adam Scott, like you've said, from Parks and Rec and Party Down. Despite being directed by Ben Stiller, this doesn't look like it's going to be a comedy. It might have some comedic moments, just because that's kind of his background, but it looks more like kind of hard sci-fi concept, which I'm thoroughly in for. This concept of like dividing your work life and your personal life and not being able to remember anything from the other side while you're in that particular box, you know, it looks really cool. And like you said, Brian, Apple TV Plus has had a lot of hits over the last couple years. They really haven't missed yet. So I'm super intrigued about this show.
Yeah, so that's Severance that's coming to Apple TV Plus this Friday. I'm sure one of us will be checking that out and talking about it at some point in the coming months. Moving into some movies that are coming out this week. On Friday, we've got Uncharted coming to theaters only. So this is based on the Uncharted video game series. And the plot is Nathan Drake and his wisecracking partner, Victor Sully Sullivan, embark on a dangerous quest to find the greatest treasure never found, while also tracking clues that may lead to Nate's long-lost brother. I have to say, I have never played the Uncharted games. I know they're insanely popular and many people have played them. I'm hoping one of you two has maybe played them, but this film is going to be directed by Ruben Fleischer from a screenplay by Rafe Lee Judkins, Art Markham, and Matt Holloway. and stars Tom Holland as Nathan Drake and Mark Wahlberg as Victor Sully Sullivan. I can't say that this trailer looks incredible. It kind of looks like a generic adventure movie of sorts, but because this is based on an acclaimed series and I love going to the movies, I'll probably end up seeing this. These two
Brian,
guys.
we're both going to end up seeing this because we're talking about it in a couple weeks. So
this is right. Okay.
Regardless of whether it's good or not, we're going to see it.
This is kind of news to me. Chris is going gung ho with the theaters, and I'm so here for it. This is amazing. Steve, did you ever play the Uncharted games, or do you have any interest in this movie?
Yes, I definitely played the Uncharted games. I will say that watching the trailer the very first time, the first teaser trailer, I was like, oh, okay, so that's how Marvel was able to keep Tom Holland for Spider-Man. Because they were basically, I feel like Sony was like, all right, well, if you want Spider-Man, we need him for Uncharted.
That's what it's funny.
Because like the trailer looked okay. I would say, honestly and truthfully, I would have done a better fit would have been Mark Wahlberg as Nathan Drake.
Well, he was originally cast as Nathan Drake, but the movie's been in like development hell for like the last 10 years.
I think it's nearly been a decade. So that's a great call, Steve.
That's a perfect call. But the funny thing is Mark Wahlberg over the last 10 years has like aged out of Nathan Drake, and now he's a better fit for Sully, according to Sony.
I mean, because Sully is an older character.
He is.
Like,
okay,
he would be more so like Prince Brosnan or something like that. Something where that age range would be.
Oh, so interesting.
That's what I would have went with. I would have been Nathan Drake, Mark Wahlberg, Prince Brosnan as Sully, something like that. But I'm interested to see how this is going to play out, because even with the scene with the airplane and all the baggage is kind of like falling out, it kind of was like, but I'm interested. I'll watch it, just because the thing is, I just want one video game movie to really hit.
Sonic the Hedgehog, bro.
There you go. But other than that, it's like, I need one. I was so excited for Assassin's Creed and it just never happened. But this is the one. Hopefully it ends up being a hit. And if it does, kudos to Tom Holland.
Video game movies are there's a low bar, that's why I'm half joking when I say that Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the best video game movies ever made, because the bar is so low that like
it's definitely one of the best Olive Garden ads ever made.
Certainly that.
There's one movie that got pushed back so much that I don't even know if it's going to happen. Sorry to throw you guys off if by any chance, but if you guys ever play Kane and Lynch, it's a game basically where Kane is trying to put together a bank robbery, and he needs 4 people for the team, and he's got his crew together. They've been knowing each other for years, and then one of the guys get into a bar fight and he gets arrested. So he's like, "Oh, we have to shut it down. We can't do this because we need 4 people. We absolutely need 4 people." And one of the other guys, a part of the heist, was like, "I know a guy," and he gets lynched. Apparently, they put it together. They put the plan in motion. They get to the bank, and Lynch has a problem where he blacks out. When he blacks out, he kills every hostage in the bank. And not only does he kill every hostage, he kills the other 2 people part of the heist. Like, he just lost it.
What the hell?
That's the video game.
That could be a great movie.
The movie, Bruce Willis and Jamie Foxx.
Oh, man.
That was supposed to happen, and it just got pushed back so much. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Especially now.
Yeah. Jamie Foxx was the one that was going to black out. Bruce Willis was going to be the main person. And the game is so crazy. Like, not only did they do that, they were robbing the bank for this Chinese mafia. And then the Chinese mafia dude's like, "Well, I just need you to take care of my daughter, watch her, make sure she doesn't do anything with this jerk of a dude on a date." Lynch blacks out again.
Oh, no.
See, it just sounds like, that concept sounds like it could just be like a great crime thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
I was super excited about that. And it It never happened. It got pushed back so many times. I think the first time they announced it was like 2015. It's been 7 years.
Wow.
I don't think it's going to happen. But that was the one that I thought was going to be. I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, you had high hopes for it.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. But in regards to Uncharted, I've also played the video games like Steve. They're already movies in and of themselves, basically. They're basically just movies that you're playing. You know? They're so good. Highly recommend them to anybody that's never played Uncharted. Brian, I actually think you would have a lot of fun with them. They're like right up your alley in terms of like the video games that you tend to play.
Yeah.
So yeah. We'll see what the movie's like when Brian and I watch it, and we'll get back to you.
Definitely will. Yeah, so that's Uncharted. That'll be out this Friday in theaters. Moving on, we've also got Dog coming to theaters this Friday. This is directed by Channing Tatum and Reed Carolyn in both of their directorial debuts, and follows the plot of this is: with a dog named Lulu by his side, Army Ranger Briggs races down the Pacific coast to make it to a soldier's funeral on time. There's a little bit more to this story, but it's a man and his dog story. They're on a journey.
I'm
if
already
you're in
crying
for this movie, yeah, I'm
already crying.
We know how dog movies tend to go, and they always end in tears, whether they're happy tears or sad tears. The tears will flow. We got Channing Tatum, who has kind of been a little bit out of the game for a little while. I'm happy to see him back. He had a really fun cameo in Free Guy last year that I really enjoyed. And coming to direct a movie and star in it here, I think this movie has potential. Again, it looks a little bit generic, probably similar to other things you've seen before, but Channing Tatum's got charisma to spare, and I wouldn't put it past him to make a really fun movie. Chris, what did you think of the trailer for Dog?
Like I said, Brian, this is one of those movies where right off the bat, you know that you're going to cry. It's involving a man and his dog, and you know, they go on a journey, and along the way, the dog changes the man, or maybe the man changes the dog this time around. Who's to say? Regardless, it ends in tears. I'm probably not going to watch this movie in theaters.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe VOD. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah. That's really all I got on this flick. I don't want to cry, Brian. That's really the main reason why I'm not going to watch Dog.
It's understandable. Steve, are you a fan of Channing Tatum at all? Have you seen his movies? Would you be interested in seeing him direct?
Yeah, so I actually saw this trailer as well. Spider-Man trailers.
Okay.
It was a Spider-Man trailer.
Cool.
So yeah, when I saw it, I was like, okay. Immediately when I was watching it, I was like, why are they playing this trailer during Spider-Man? I want to see nothing but superhero trailers. But the trailer was pretty cool. I was like, okay, he's got a dog that's got anger issues, or you know what I'm saying, just one of those manic dogs. And then you get to watching it, and I'm just thinking about all these other Marley and Me. Like Chris said, I'm thinking about all these other dog movies, and I'm just like, what's going to happen? What can go wrong?
Yeah.
But as far as Channing Tatum movies, I've seen what was the thing? I can't even think of the name now. But it's a movie where his wife, she's under some medication.
Oh, Side Effects. Yeah.
Soderbergh
movie. That's a great movie.
Yeah, I saw that one. I thought that one was really good. I haven't seen the Magic Mikes. Sorry, fans.
I haven't either. We talked about this recently when Magic Mike 3 got announced. I got to come back to these. I've heard great things.
Pop-O-Holics might do movies. A Magic Mike month.
Magic
Channing Tatum is from my hometown, Steve. Me and Christian's hometown. He grew up in Tampa, so Magic Mike actually takes place in Tampa to a large degree, I think. Okay. So we're not being good Tampa residents at the moment.
Not repping the Tampa area.
Honestly, it's sad.
And I've seen a few. I was kind of interested to see how he was going to do in a Gambit movie, but apparently with the merger of Sony and Marvel, it got canned.
Yeah,
they had like a whole article about how disappointed he was because that's one his favorite X-Men character.
Yeah, he said that he could not watch any Marvel movies after the movie got shut down.
Yeah, he said no, he's not going to. Well, he said he can't, but I don't know if that means he's never going to watch another one or what. It would be nice, like maybe if they actually do an X-Men movie, they just make him Gambit.
Yeah,
that'd be nice homage. But yeah. But yeah, for the most part, that's it for Channing Tatum.
Yeah. So that's Dog. That'll be in theaters this Friday. So moving on to something that you can watch at home this week, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre coming to Netflix this Friday. So the plot of this movie, influencers looking to breathe new life into a Texas ghost town encounter Leatherface, the legendary killer who wears a mask of human skin. This is directed by David Blue Garcia and written by Chris Thomas Devlin. From a story that was co-written by Fede Alvarez and Rodo Sayagüez, and is a direct sequel to the original The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. This follows in a long line of recent horror movies like Halloween 2018 that are kind of a reboot, requel type of thing, forgetting about the potentially bad sequels that have been made in the interim and trying to bring this back. It stars Sarah Yarkin, Elsie Fisher, Mark Burnham, Jacob Lattimore, and many more. I don't know if you guys have seen the original, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I saw it only for the first time, probably 4-ish years ago, and was kind of blown away with it. I always thought of it as something that was super gruesome, super graphic, and it really is much more tension filled than I was thinking, and kind of has this vegetarian / anti modern agricultural practices message underlying it that I wasn't expecting at all going into the movie. It obviously does have the things you'd expect, the kind of backwoods messed up family. But yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly recommend it. I'm a big fan of horror generally. But Steve, have you seen the original movie or any of the sequels? And what did you think of the trailer for Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
So I haven't seen the original, so I need to find that to watch that. I've seen one movie, but the movie, it was like in high school, so I don't even have a good recollection of the movie. Okay. As far as horror movies, I am not the big horror guy. That's something that I have to get over because Dead Silence ruined my life. And
oh, man.
I saw Dead Silence in theater and I was like on a date and I was like, wow, this was not a good movie to see on a date.
You're jumping into her arms. Like.
So after that, I kind of stopped seeing horror movies. I'm more into like thrillers, maybe slashers, but not necessarily horror movies. So anytime horror movies kind of pop up, I kind of just shy away from them. But I have seen this trailer. I watch a lot of Netflix, obviously. And then I'm a fan of Jacob Lattimore. I enjoyed The Shy. I enjoyed him in Collateral Beauty. I also was one of the people that was like, oh, I would love to see him in Static Shock, but now he's aged out of that character. I don't think he's going to be, you know what I'm saying, able to play Static Shock. But I'm a fan of Jacob Lattimore, so I'd like to see it. I'm definitely going to watch it because I've realized the difference between horror and just like slasher murder. So now I can tell the difference. But yeah, I would definitely check it out.
There's a moment in this trailer where a bunch of characters pull their cell phones out to record Leatherface, and they're like, you do anything and you'll get canceled. And he just revs the chainsaw, and I'm like, I'm so here for this movie. If it's like
zero fucks given.
Because it's like,
incredible.
What did you think was going to happen? Like, I don't understand that whole thing of, I'll just record you. You don't want to be on camera, but like, if I do kill you, yeah, I might go to jail, but you're dead.
I'm just going to take your phone.
He's got skin all over his face. Unrecognizable.
Do you not understand all these concepts, or you just think, oh, you'll never kill me on camera? What?
Right.
How many videos have you watched on anything?
Have you been on the internet? Yeah.
So many. But yeah.
So, Chris, what did you think of this trailer? Brian, I know, as Steve said, you're in the similar boat in being not a fan of horror movies.
How long have we been doing this show now, Brian? You know me pretty well. I'm not going to watch this movie. unless
No
unless you
chance in
watch this
hell.
movie and you're like, you have to see this movie, because I'm not totally opposed to the horror genre. It's just not my go-to genre, similar to Christian. But if you watch this movie and you're like, bro, the philosophical messaging of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, is like once in a generation filmmaking, I'd be like, fuck yeah, let's do
The
this.
chainsaw is the phallus, and it's about toxic masculinity.
But yeah, I will wait for you to watch this, and then we'll see how it goes.
As a resident of Texas, I should definitely watch this movie. But
You're obligated to, Steve. You have to.
You signed it when you started living there. Yeah, for sure.
I'm scared.
I'll let you guys know how this movie is and if it's bearable or terrifying. So yeah, that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's coming to Netflix this Friday. And that's it for the news this week, guys.
Brian, that news section was preposterously wacky. Thank
Extra
you.
wacky.
So wacky. The wackiest of news sections. I appreciate you delivering the news. That was great. Thank you. I think our main section is going to be a little bit longer this week, so we're just going to jump right in to our community feedback section. Welcome back to the Pop-O-Holics community feedback section, loyal listeners and viewers. In this section, this is where we take care of a little housekeeping for Pop-O-Holics. We'll talk a little bit about our upcoming Throwback Thursday episode. We typically go over Twitter poll results, as well as read any written 5-star reviews from Spotify or Apple Music. Once again, no new reviews, sadly, but head on over, please. We will read anything. Rate us 5 stars, write whatever you want. And we'll read it here live on the show. Christian has a great bumper that I know he is dying to play. We've played it in the past. We want to play it again. So please rate us 5-star on either of those podcast players, and write a little review, and we'll read it here on the show. In terms of Twitter poll results, we also did not have a poll this week, but that is okay, because we have an awesome Throwback Thursday episode coming up this week over on our YouTube channel. Right now in our Throwback Thursday episodes, we're in the middle of 2019's Creepy Clown Month. We did a whole month dedicated to scary killer clowns. Last week, we started off with It and It Chapter 2. And this week, we're talking about Joker, the Todd Phillips movie starring Joaquin Phoenix. This was a very interesting conversation just because of what was kind of happening culturally around this film when it came out. I remember it being, tensions were a little high when this movie came out. I remember that, to the point where some of us, I'm really speaking for myself, almost didn't go to the theater to go see it. But do you remember anything other than that specifically, Brian, that sticks out to you about this conversation?
Not specifically, but it feels like we were in a different world at that time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, speaking of toxic masculinity, this is very much in that vein. So
without a doubt. So this Thursday, head on over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Pop-O-Holics, and check out our conversation about Joker. Guys, that's going to do it for the first section of the show. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Book of Boba Fett.
I am not a bounty hunter. I've heard otherwise. I know that you sit on the throne of your former employer. Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
You were all once captains under Jabba the Hutt.
I'm here to make a proposal that's mutually beneficial. Why speak of conflict when cooperation can make us all rich?
That was from the trailer of the new Star Wars show on Disney Plus, The Book of Boba Fett. created by Jon Favreau, written by Jon Favreau, theme by Ludwig Göransson, score by Joseph Shirley, and then starring Tamora Morrison, Ming-Na Wen, Pedro Pascal, Matt Berry, David Pasquesi, Jennifer Beals, Carrie Jones, and many more.
Slight spoilers there, unfortunately, but it's fine. It's fine. Probably
This
understood.
is true. I apologize, loyal listeners. Just, I mean, skim over my cast list
All
there.
good. I apologize for the call.
No worries. Apologies.
Yes, nice.
So, gentlemen, the way we're going to break this down is, considering that Steve is our special guest, Brian and I have already talked about our history with Star Wars. In 2019, we dedicated all of December to reviewing the entire Skywalker saga leading up to the Rise of Skywalker. So if you haven't heard those episodes, go back to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. You can hear us talk about those. But we've never heard what Steve's history with the Star Wars franchise is. And after Steve and I had a conversation behind the scenes, I was actually super interested to have him on the show for this particular episode because of his unique history with Star Wars. And that's as much as I'm going to say. Steve, why don't you take it from here? What's your history with the Star Wars franchise? And what's your history with the character of Boba Fett, if you have any?
Okay, so it's 2015 technically, but going into 2016, I'm at a New Year's Eve party. And we were just talking. Everybody was just talking. We're drinking. And then someone was all like talking about the new Star Wars movie that was about to come out or did come out. I'm not sure back then. But they brought it up and I was like, oh, I've never seen Star Wars. And then it was just like, every record scratch. Everybody stopped. They were like, what the fuck? And I was like, yeah, I've never seen any Star Wars anything.
Who brought this guy?
Yeah. Pretty much it was like, excuse me? And I was like, I got to say it again. They were like, all right, so what we're going to do, and they pulled it up. Well, they didn't pull it up. One dude pulled out a DVD box set. He had like a whole bunch of DVDs. And he was like, we're going to start right now. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. We had already been drinking. And I was like, no, we got to watch the ball drop. And he's like, no, we're going to watch.
He's like, guys, the Death Star blows up at midnight. That's what we're doing.
So we watched Star Wars. We watched episode 5, 6, and 7. Or is it 4, 5, and 6? Or
4, 5, and 6 is the original trilogy.
Right. So we watched episode 4. Episode 4 ends, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're really, really close to midnight. We need to watch the ball drop. And he's like, episode 5. So
this is more important.
So we watch episode 5, and then by the time episode 5 ends, we're really, really drunk. They had been playing like a Star Wars game, like a drinking game. They were like, I can't remember what it was. It was it was a while ago, and I was drunk that night. But they were like, it was a game where it was just basically anytime something happens, we're going to drink. Because anytime
someone says the Force, you drink.
No, that's a lie.
Yeah, that's dangerous for sure.
But like, it was something like that. They pulled it up on Google. It's some Star Wars drinking game. And they were like, anytime this happens, you got to drink. So we were drinking and we got pretty drunk. So we didn't finish the third one. Oh, well, we didn't start the third one. So I ended up watching the third one later on by myself. And I was like, oh, those were pretty good. And I was all like, now I need to watch, I guess, 1, 2, and 3 because 4, 5, and 6 already came out. And they're like, yeah. And so I watched 1, 2, and 3. And then later on, those were the ones that I've seen. I then ended up watching The Mandalorian along with everyone else. I was week to week with everybody. And then after that, I ended up watching Bad Batch and Star Wars Visions. So I've watched those things. Then this week, you guys asked me, hey, you want to come on? And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So then I went back and I watched it in numerical order, not in order that they came out. So I watched 1 through 6, and then I watched Solo, but I did not watch Rogue One. And I still haven't, to this day, watched 7, 8, 9 plus Rogue One. So I still haven't watched those.
You'll get there eventually. Or if you never do, that's okay as well.
I'm gonna go ahead and say it's worth it. If you've enjoyed what you watched so far, I think it's worth it, Steve.
Yeah, might as well just watch them all and see what happens. And then I've not watched Clone Wars, which was on Cartoon Network, which everybody says you must watch that. So I need to watch those as well. And then I've played Star Wars Unleashed or whatever on the video games and everything.
The
like
Force
that.
Unleashed.
Force Unleashed, yeah. So I played those two, and that's it. So yeah. So I got a little history with Star Wars, but I actually watched it in my adult life. So
which I find to be super interesting, considering that Brian and I have, saw Star Wars originally when we were children, so we have kind of this like long drawn out history with the franchise. Both you and I, Brian, I think it's safe to say, like it to varying degrees, right?
Oh yeah, definitely been a lifelong fan. Yeah. Like you said, grew up watching them, watched the prequel trilogy as they came out in theaters. So definitely been a fan for a long time.
But why I'm so interested to hear what Steve has to say about the Book of Boba Fett is coming to it in your adult life. It means that you don't have these like rose tinted glasses for the franchise, and you really have kind of a more honest critique or opinion of what the franchise is as a whole. Do you like Star Wars from what you've seen? How do you feel about the franchise, coming to it when you were like late 20s, early 30s?
So I'll say this, and I always didn't understand the Star Wars versus Star Trek, like beef and things. I didn't understand that. So now that I've watched Star Wars and I've watched some Star Trek, which I was going to start Star Trek has an animated series as well.
Yeah.
On Paramount. And I was going to start that. And I was just like, Star Wars is better.
Like, oh, wow.
Shots fired at any of our Trekker
down.
fans.
Yeah.
We apologize.
I just was like, the Star Trek is more drama-ish, where Star Wars kind of has the drama, but then it's more like, it feels like more action-packed. There is action in Star Trek, don't get me wrong, but it's not, to me, not the same. But and I was just like, okay, so Star Wars is better. So that's my thoughts, like according to like in my 20s or whatever. I was like, okay, this is actually better. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I guess it's biased or whatever. It's my opinion. Right. But yeah, so when I'm watching Boba Fett, it's like how you said, I saw it in my 20s. I don't understand the difference. Or people were like, the original trilogy is it. That's where they should have left it at. This and that. Because when I watched it, it was remastered, digitally remastered, things like that. So I watched it and I was like,
you probably saw like the most up-to-date cut or edition of the films, like with the most recent special effects and all the most recent changes in them, I would assume.
Yeah. So I was just like, I thought they were good. And what I really appreciate about Boba Fett is, and really Mandalorian, Boba Fett as well, in the original trilogy, they have the when they cut scenes, they do the little like the little swipe or whatever. And I appreciate that they paid homage to that, and they still do it in the new episode.
It's not Star Wars without the wipe transitions. That's all I have to say.
I wish they did the actual like music, and then they do the whole episode thing like that. Script. I think that would be cool too, to pay homage, but I enjoy the swipes and things like that. I really appreciate that homage that they pay to it, staying true to the original series.
So Steve, before I move on to Brian, and I'm going to ask Brian the same question as well, what are your thoughts about the character Boba Fett, having watched the original trilogy, watched the prequels, and seen some other Star Wars content? Like, going into the Book of Boba Fett, how did you feel about that character in particular?
So I was really, really hype about it because of the fact that I've watched, like you said, the original shows and then the prequels, things like that. And then in The Mandalorian, when he pops up, it's like, oh, snap, that's fucking Boba Fett. So I was like, it's going to be really, really crazy, especially with the fact that Mandalorian was really, really good. So I was like, oh, snap, that's Boba Fett. This is about to be crazy. He's a freaking bounty hunter. He badass, all this other stuff. So I'm like, if we thought Mandalorian was going to hold your horses, we're about to see Boba Fett.
Right.
Yeah. So
I love it.
I'll say that without saying much about about Boba Fett.
Brian, like I said, our listeners already know about our history with Star Wars. How do you feel about the character Boba Fett? Like prior to watching the Book of Boba Fett, what did he like represent to you? Because I know he's some things to specific fans, and I'll talk about that when I talk about my opinions. But like, I'm very interested to hear what you thought about this character prior to watching this new show.
So I was never someone who Boba Fett was my favorite character. Obviously, he plays kind of on the opposite side of our main characters throughout the original trilogy.
Right.
I did very much appreciate the backstory of his father, Jango Fett, and how involved that he was with the Clone Wars. And I'm sure that they delve a bit more into that in some of the animated shows that I haven't seen. But I will say you've got a pretty excellent helmet back there behind you. And I did have one of my favorite Star Wars toys. They had a replica helmet that was smaller that opened up and had like some little, like, I can't remember the exact scenery that was inside of it, but I loved this toy and had this when I was, 10, 11 years old, and very much loved the aesthetic of Boba Fett. And I will say I was not the most excited for this show, even though I did appreciate him popping up in The Mandalorian, and I am a big fan of The Mandalorian. I thought that show was pretty consistently great for both seasons. But yeah, I was never one of these people who Boba Fett was like, I'm a diehard fan of this character. I need to know more, even though I did appreciate a little bit of what it was expanded upon in the prequel trilogy.
So it's probably safe to say that out of the three of us, I'm probably the most intense Boba Fett fanatic.
You don't say.
Really?
And, I think my opinion of Boba Fett kind of aligns with a lot of fans' opinion of Boba Fett, which is like, he is the pinnacle of mystery and badassery within the original trilogy, right? He doesn't say a lot. He has like 3 lines in the entire original trilogy. He's really just meant to stand there and look like an intimidating bounty hunter, basically, a force to be reckoned with. Then we got the prequels, in which George Lucas decided that it would be interesting to hear about his origins. And while at the time I wasn't really a fan of like the demystification of this particular character, because this mystery aspect of the character really was one of his strengths. He never took his helmet off in the original trilogy. We didn't know what he looked like underneath, and we knew very little about the Mandalorians at that point in time. This singular character is responsible for spawning this entire culture within the Star Wars universe because of how interested fans were in this one character. But over the years, I would say that the prequels have grown on me, and it is interesting kind of seeing how Boba Fett is the clone son of this incredibly talented bounty hunter, Jango Fett. Through the Clone Wars, he's involved with a lot of those incidences. We get to see him grow as a bounty hunter himself and kind of learn the ropes. But going into this show, I was very excited because when he appeared in season 2 of The Mandalorian, we had the opinion of Boba Fett is that he's a badass, but I'll be honest, in the original trilogy, we never really see him do anything incredibly badass. Like Han Solo takes him out while he's blind, and his jetpack malfunctions and he flies into the Sarlacc pit. Not a particularly awesome
Like a
death
boss.
for a character that's
Like a
supposed to be
boss.
so awesome. But when Robert Rodriguez came back to direct that episode, The Tragedy, in Mandalorian season 2, this was the most badass we've ever seen Boba Fett. We were like, this is the Boba Fett we've been imagining in our minds for the last 40 years. Like it was one of the most exciting things I had seen in recent years in Star Wars. So I think it's safe to say that expectations were pretty high going into the Book of Boba Fett series for me. So yeah, that being said, why don't we get into our overall non-spoiler opinions of the Book of Boba Fett? And Steve, considering that you're our special guest, I want to start with you. What did you think, without spoiling anything, of the Book of Boba Fett?
So overall, I thought it was pretty good. I really was super hyped, like you said, about coming into it, just seeing the Mandalorian and him being introduced, and I was like, oh, we're about to see the craziest thing that we've ever seen as far as Star Wars. The fact that they were giving them his own series, we're going to dive deeper into his character. We found out a little bit in the first prequel and everything like that. But overall, I just was like, okay, it's pretty good. I thought that I expected more. I'm not going to lie. I hadn't watched Boba Fett before this week. I wasn't watching it week to week, actually. So when you guys told me, hey, go and watch it, and I was like, all right, cool, I can. So I did. And for me, I was expecting Mandalorian-esque because I watched Mandalorian week to week. So I was expecting that type of stuff. And the reason why I never watched Boba Fett week to week was because I saw on the timeline it was kind of quiet. I was like, oh, there's not very many people talking about Boba Fett. So I was expecting it to be more of like super hypeness. I will say that I did enjoy the actor. I'm not sure what his name is.
Tamora Morrison.
Tamora Morrison. I appreciated him. I thought he was really good. I thought he was a pretty good Boba Fett. And then overall with the story, it just felt like it's kind of like we got some stuff, and then it was kind of like all over the place. And then where in episode 5, we get basically the Mandalorian appears. It's pretty much a whole episode, but non-spoiler. But it was like, sheesh, like this is what I was expecting the entirety. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that kind of like made me feel some type of way about the overall story of it. But like I said, I would give it, to me, I gave it a solid 7, but you guys might have different opinions about it because also I am one of the people that watched it later on in life at 25. Right. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of those things where it's just like, depends on your taste, because if you guys watched it as children, you grew up with Star Wars, I'm pretty sure y'all have a whole different opinion about Book of Boba Fett.
Brian, how do you feel about the Book of Boba Fett?
Here we go.
So I thought I hadn't been watching it week to week either, just like Steve. So I watched it all in the last week. I watched the first 4 episodes in one day, pretty much one sitting. And at that point, I had pretty high hopes for the show. I had heard kind of mixed things about the first couple of episodes, had watched the first episode and wasn't sold on it, came back and rewatched it. And in the context of the first 4 episodes, I thought that was a pretty nice self-contained story that, from what was hinted at in his appearance, as well as Fennec Shand in the Mandalorian episode, giving us that backstory of how they got to that point, how they became partners. I was really there for all that. I think this show, after episode 4, jumped the Sarlacc for a bit. Terrible. This is so bad. But yeah, what really stuck out to me, though, in the first 4 episodes, even though I liked the plot the most in that portion of the show, the CG. Disney Plus, I've come to expect their shows to be, if not on movie level, close to movie level. And this felt like the first show where they were really skimping on the CG budget. Wow. And it was quite noticeable to me and was a bit disappointing, especially in the action moments. And I was a bit surprised by that, considering how great The Mandalorian consistently looked. And the back half, the CG got significantly better. But as you mentioned, Steve, it kind of just goes all over the place and becomes a different show and does attempt to wrap it up in the end. But it felt like it should have been making this happen from the beginning, and it felt a bit like 2 different shows. So that didn't work exactly for me. I think the front half is doing very much a bunch of homages to Return of the Jedi, and I appreciated all that. Having watched those growing up, I was getting a lot of these references. The back half tries to do a bit more of like an Empire Strikes Back thing. And I think this show is working at its best when it's not trying to do the mythological stuff, when it's doing more of the character stuff for me. I think that works a lot better in the original series. But Boba Fett does have a genuine arc throughout the course of this show that I think pays off pretty well, even though a bunch of characters kind of get thrown in the mix. I think that, and I don't want to upset you here, Chris. I mentioned this a little bit. The Star Wars lingo got to a point where I just, in The Mandalorian, we had Cara Dune saying Dank Farrik every 30 seconds, and it was terribly bad at a certain point. But she was really the only character that was going out and saying these things. This show seemed like every other word was some reference that I had no context for.
Brian, have you ever watched the contemporary Battlestar Galactica show?
I haven't seen any Battlestar Galactica, actually.
Okay. In Battlestar Galactica, they use a word, frack, which is essentially an in-universe curse word that they can say instead of like fuck or shit or anything like that.
Sure.
So when making The Mandalorian, I have to assume that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau were like, can we create a Star Wars in-universe curse word? Because it had never been done before, really. I mean, there are a couple of like Huttese words that Jabba speaks in Return of the Jedi that are technically curse words or like slander against people.
Fodder was introduced earlier too, right?
Bantha fodder's also kind of like a very, I would say, tame curse word.
It seems like bullshit, right? Like that's exactly what I think of it as, at least.
Exactly. But Dank Farrik is supposed to be like the new frack of the Star Wars universe. So whenever you hear a character say like Dank Farrik, they're really like, fuck, you know?
Yeah.
So crazy. Even like, I heard the words, but I was like, there's no subtitle for it. And I just kind of went with my life.
See, if I wasn't watching with subs, half of this show would have made even less sense than it did. Because there are context clues sometimes, but I definitely benefited from reading it. So in closing up non-spoiler thoughts, I think this show it never hit the peaks of something like The Mandalorian and just felt a little bit all over the place. But overall, as we'll get into in spoilers, there was a bunch that I liked about this show, even though it's not flawless and not to what I've come to expect from the Disney Plus standard. But I thought there was a decent amount to enjoy.
Yeah. Brian, I have to agree with you. There are moments in this show that I really do enjoy. Like, I think they're really great Star Wars moments. But I talked about the first 4 episodes when we did our mega quick hits at the beginning of the month, because I had been watching it week to week and episode 4 had just come out. And one of the things that I mentioned in that episode was how atrocious the pacing of the first 4 episodes had been. And I think this is a problem that only grew worse and worse as the show went on because of some of the creative choices made, especially once we hit episode 5. I honestly, and it's such a shame because you look at the creative team for this show and they've all created really good things in the past. So you would think going into this that this would just be more of the same. You know, the entire series was written by Jon Favreau. He directed Iron Man. He show ran both Mandalorian seasons with Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni helped him write episode 6 of this show. So you have Robert Rodriguez, who directed what I just said a couple of moments ago was the most badass Boba Fett scene we'd ever seen in Star Wars in The Mandalorian Season 2. He directed 3 of the episodes from the Book of Boba Fett. So all the creative elements are here to have something that's like genuinely awesome, you know? And the show just didn't deliver on that. You know, I think I went back because both of you were watching it, like binge watching it, basically. I myself went back. I rewatched episodes 1 through 4 all together. And I will say, Brian, I do agree with you. Watching those episodes back to back instead of week to week, it is actually a very well-contained story. You can see Boba Fett's narrative arc over the course of those 4 episodes. I disagree with the way that they've chosen to pace those episodes with the flashbacks and the present day stuff. Typically in narrative storytelling, you want to make sure that your flashbacks have some thematic ties to what's happening in present day. And over the course of those first 4 episodes, I personally couldn't identify any thematic ties to what Boba Fett was experiencing in these flashback scenes to what was happening to him in Tatooine when they would cut back to present. I honestly think that if they had chosen to make like the first 3 episodes this flashback and then present day stuff, I think it would have flown much better. But that's just me nitpicking a piece of art that I didn't work on, you know? So like, what's the point of that really?
No, I mean, it's fair though. If you have trouble with the pacing, it's taking you out of the show. I think some of the best part of the show for me is the flashbacks. So I imagine I would have been there for it as well.
And you know, I didn't feel that way when we did our mega quick hits. I was not enjoying the flashbacks. It wasn't until watching them all 4 together, I was like, I'm really digging what's happening here in these flashbacks.
Okay. Yeah,
but,
so I would say the same way, where like I binge watched it and like I was like, okay, this is a story within itself. Cool. And then as I watched episode 5, and I was like, oh, we're getting into more badassery is what it felt like to me. And so like, maybe it's just my thoughts on it, because I'm thinking, oh, he's a bounty hunter. It should be like this the entire series, whether, you know what I'm saying, even though we were getting flashbacks in those first 4, more character development.
The thing is, and I do want to touch on that without, you know, spoiling too much, you know, I want to pull up the summary here and just read it to you guys really quick. The summary for this show is Boba Fett and Fennec Shand attempt to make a name for themselves in the galaxy's underworld by taking over the territory once controlled by Jabba the Hutt. Steve, he's no longer a bounty hunter in this show. That's the whole thing. He doesn't want to be a bounty hunter anymore. He's tired of working for stupid people, basically, and tired of putting his life on the line. So you can say that like he was a bounty hunter, but like that's not what we're getting here, right? All the narrative we get in the first 4 episodes is supposed to show us that like he's changed in some way.
Or so basically the thing that everyone loved about him from the original and what they wanted to explore. Away. They said, let's go after that. Let's see what else we can do.
So outside of just the pacing being so poor for the show, once we hit episode 5, a lot of these other issues start to take place where the show kind of loses its identity. Like it doesn't know what it wants to be because we totally shift gears and end up following an entirely different character. I'm not going to mention who that, I mean, we've already kind of mentioned who that character is, but the show totally shifts gears and we, for 2 episodes, totally leave Boba Fett in a show that's called The Book of Boba Fett. Now, I will mention that when Kathleen Kennedy first announced this show, she did say that it was going to be a Mandalorian spinoff. So maybe our expectations should have been a little adjusted going into this show. But all I have to say is that from a storytelling and creative perspective, if you're going to call your title is incredibly important. Your title is like your thesis statement for the show, right? And if the show is called The Book of Boba Fett, then Boba Fett better fucking be your main character. That's all I have to say. Like, he is the focal point. Every other supporting character has to do just that. Support his story in some way, shape, or form, and build up whatever type of arc you're trying to illustrate for that particular character. So right off the bat, I think calling it The Book of Boba Fett was a huge problem because it set a specific expectation for the viewers that they weren't planning on delivering on. Now, Brian and I talked a little bit behind the scenes about how, what if the show had been called like The Mandalorian: The Book of Boba Fett? Like, would that have shifted people's perspective? It would have changed mine, because at that point I would have known, okay, this is a Mandalorian show, but it's like having a series of books under the Mandalorian series, and it's like, this one is Boba Fett. Like, we're just going to learn a little bit more about this particular character. Chances are the Mandalorian's definitely going to show up because it's still in this Mandalorian series, you know? So I just feel like Disney set these expectations, or Lucasfilm set these expectations, and made this promise that even though we got some really amazing things, like great Star Wars in episode 5 and 6, they just totally veered away from that promise. And in turn, what that does is it self-destructs the rest of your show, you know, because you don't have a clear thesis statement of what you want the show to be. So yeah, I when it comes down to it, I know I've been rambling for a really long time, about my feelings about this show. I genuinely do like some moments, and I do want to get into those moments when we go into spoilers. But I just feel like this show was kind of like a narrative dumping ground for The Mandalorian. Like, at the end of Mandalorian season 2, we have Luke Skywalker come and pick up Grogu from Din Djarin, and we think that Grogu's going to go off on this adventure and become this great Jedi. But you look at the show and you're like, I think the creators at Lucasfilm regretted that choice, but they didn't want to spend any time on it in Mandalorian season 3. So they were like, what elements do we need to put into this show? Like, how can we work backwards from like what we want to achieve with The Mandalorian and like kind of fit some Boba Fett elements into this? And then they were like, the Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian season 2.5, nailed it. Get it done. You know, like we didn't even know the show was in existence until the very end of Mandalorian season 2. We've been hearing about the Obi-Wan Kenobi show for 4 years. So like, I feel like that also speaks to kind of maybe how quickly this show was put together and like what its true intentions were for like the Dave Filoni verse and the Mandalorian property. And they just, I don't know. I feel bad as someone who loves the book of who loves Boba Fett. I feel bad that they kind of like besmirched this character's name by like
gave us like here.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sorry, that was a long...
for you. Take it, and then we'll go back and rewrite the bad thing that we did at the end of Mandalorian season 2.
Right, and I genuinely didn't even think that was a bad thing. Like, I personally enjoyed that thing. I know not everybody did. But I thought that was, you know, taking us in a really interesting direction with Luke Skywalker coming in and taking Grogu. I've gone on a long rant. I've maybe spoiled a couple of things during my rant, so I do apologize. But I promise that there are aspects of this show that I really like. And with that, I do want to enter into our spoiler section. So, Steve, I want to hear from you, you know, maybe some episodes that you really enjoyed, maybe some moments that you really enjoyed. If there were things that didn't work super well for you, I'd like to hear about that too. Just kind of talk about some of the things you liked and disliked about the show. So
some things that I liked, or we talked about, were the homage that they paid to the original series, where the flashes and things like that, when they go to the next section and things like that, they skip. Even when they're inside of the bar and they're playing some of the music, some of the same old themes. I'm not sure if anybody else caught that. I mean, we probably
you've got Max Rebo playing the piano in the Sanctuary, the bar that Boba Fett and Fennec Shand go to. Max Rebo's that like blue elephant guy.
Blue elephant, yeah. And it just was like, oh, he's playing some of the same tunes and it's giving you that same feel and things like that. So I was like, okay, I appreciate that. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed even in the very beginning when Boba Fett comes out the ground and things like that.
That was so awesome.
Someone showed me a clip of Patton Oswalt.
Yes.
And he literally says it like
Boba Fett's Mandalorian glove emerges from the sands of Tatooine, like almost verbatim.
We talked about Parks and Rec earlier. This is an incredible callback, Steve. Yes, absolutely. I'm so happy you brought that up.
I was like, oh, this is really cool. I didn't know that was Parks and Rec, but it was just like something I was like, oh, that's Patton Oswalt, and he was talking about it, and I was like, yo, that's pretty cool. Like, he literally did it exactly what he said. It happens in the episode, so I thought that was really cool. Other things that I liked, I enjoyed even when he's like kind of like strapped to the back of the beast and everything like that. He's chained, and they're pulling him. Things like that, you get this, you see how dry his skin is and things like that. Then he takes the bath, and then you notice it's a healing process that's going on with the bath that he's doing. I appreciated that. That gave you some explanation kind of what that was going on with that. You get the two sons when they show like in the T visor in his helmet, like they show it from his perspective, I guess a first person view, and you see two sons. And then later on when, I think it was episode 3 or something like that, you see the 3 moons in the background. And
which I don't know if we've ever, maybe we have seen them once before in Attack of the Clones possibly, but I don't know if we've ever seen the 3 moons of Tatooine before. They always focus on the 2 suns, you know? But I thought that was really cool as well.
I was just like, oh, okay, so this planet, because once again, I don't know much other than what I've seen. I haven't dived into lore and done a bunch of deep diving, but I was just like, oh, okay, there's 2 suns here, but there's also 3 moons. So I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. But other than that, like, you know what I'm saying, just those little callbacks, those things that I really, really enjoyed. I enjoyed even when they bring in can't remember her name now at this very moment. When they bring her in that episode, it's the 3rd episode.
Ming-Na Wen, Fennec Shand.
Yeah, they bring her in, and then with the 3 moons, it's kind of like symbolism in a sense. There's like 3 moons, and it's him and it's this beast that he's been with the entire time. It's mostly been just Boba Fett and him. But there's a 3rd moon, and then boom, they bring in a 3rd character. I think that's a little bit of symbolism, like, oh yeah, the first time we get to see the 3 moons, because most of the time you saw 2 suns, and right. Boom. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But those are just the little things that I saw that I thought that was really good early on. We diving into all 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, and anything that you wanted to pull from any of the episodes were. Oh,
well, I was trying to do the good stuff for Boba Fett, but the dark saber, man, when freaking Mandalorian,
seeing Din Djarin with the dark saber,
bro, when he's got it and it's so heavy, and you can kind of see it even like when he first releases it, it's like boom, he's dragging it, and then he accidentally cuts his leg. I thought that was cool, and then I thought it was really cool when he's walking through the bars and like he's limping, and then when he gets around a crowd of people, he walks straight like normally, like I can't show my weakness. He gets back on the elevator, he's like, ah.
That's a great character beat. Yeah,
I enjoyed that. I really like that about the Mandalorian. It's just more so I'll never show weakness to anybody, things like that. And then that even they ask him a question, have you ever shown your face? And then Mandalorian has to say, yes, I have. And they're like, well, then you're no longer a Mandalorian. And it's just like,
which is definitely, I'm assuming that's definitely going to be like his quest for Mandalorian season 3, like having to go back to Mandalore and trying to figure out a way to reclaim his religion, basically.
Yeah. So I enjoyed all of those little pieces. Those are things that I really enjoyed.
Brian, what were some of the things that really worked for you, and maybe some of the things that didn't work for you in the Book of Boba Fett?
Okay, I don't want to take all the good moments. I'll just do positives for now, maybe, and then we can go around for negatives. I think probably my favorite episode is episode 2, where Boba is accepted and kind of goes through a ritual process to become a Tusken Raider, and the tragic way that all plays out. This was kind of, I didn't know exactly what to expect from the show, but once I was in it, this is like, okay, this is what I want from this character, you know, someone who is genuinely changing, has a checkered past, and has a found family that, even though we don't get to hear them speak a lot in subtitled language, they have an interesting kind of sign language
like
that they use. That was kind of cool, that I didn't realize, getting into their weaponry and their culture. I really loved all of that. I will say the scene, and it felt like, I can't remember if it's Mandalorian season 1 or 2, but the train sequence, is it a train or what do they call it?
It's a train.
The train hijacking sequence, I thought it was a little bit uninspired. I think it kind of pulled from something else from Mandalorian season 2, and also one of the Fast and Furious movies, where it's like one of the greatest train hijacking ish scenes of
Let's just say, in the history of cinema, we've seen a lot of train heist sequences.
Yes,
you know?
Exactly.
So that's understandable.
But him teaching,
and we had one in Solo as well.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm confusing it with. But him teaching teaching the Tuskens how to ride the speed bikes, all like of that stuff. I was like, this. I'm totally in the show at this point, which possibly explains some of my negatives on the back half, leaning away from some of that stuff. I'm a big fan of Thundercat. I actually saw him last year at a local venue here. So seeing him pop up in this show and combining it with this, what I think is a kind of new thing, these tech people who have incorporated tech into their bodies, and
they're called mods. Yeah.
Okay, so the mods and the way that they explained Fennec Shan's character being saved by Boba Fett, all of that, I'm like, this show is really working.
While you're on that topic, a couple things I want to mention about this.
Yeah.
Remember when I was talking about the first 4 episodes during our mega quick hits, and I was like, there's a scene straight out of Johnny Mnemonic in this episode.
Oh,
the scene with Thundercat in like the mod parlor.
Yeah.
Where he's working on Shennick Fan. I was like, I feel like I'm watching Johnny Mnemonic right now.
That's a good shout.
It seems so out of place. I will say this about the mods. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I've seen online a lot of people getting frustrated with Boba Fett just like walking up to them in episode 3 and being like, you're hired. Like, without any questions whatsoever. He's like, you don't have any work. You now work for me, right? And when I first saw that, watching it week to week, I was like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, how would he, why would he just walk up to these people, not knowing any of their skills, and just being like, come join my crew, you know? But then watching the first 4 episodes back to back and seeing that he took Fennec Shan to a mod parlor prior to meeting this particular group of mods, because that did happen in a flashback in the past, that makes sense. You know, like, he already has a relationship with these people that like mod their bodies with this tech on Tatooine. So like it definitely kind of fixed that slightly, you know, why he was so accepting of those particular characters, because he already had some experiences with them. So I do appreciate that about that one scene with Thundercat.
Yeah, and we also see in that moment that he genuinely wants to be a good daimyo. You know, he is trying to do good for the city that he's ruling over at that point. Steve, to the point that you were bringing up with the duel and the dark saber and stuff. The armorer says persistence without insight will lead to the same outcome. And I thought that was a really fun play on that idea of like insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yeah, that was a really fun kind of, you know, insightful moment for our characters. For positives, most of my other stuff is toward the end. I thought the rebuilt cruiser and tying it back to the prequels, all that stuff. I'm always, I bring it up a lot, but I'm always here for a good montage, you know, badass vehicle. It gets the payoff at the very end with Grogu up in the little, thing. Is like,
the second I saw that dome, and I what's her face? Amy Sedaris, her character was like, I removed the astromech cockpit or whatever. I was like, Grogu's definitely going in that dome. That's the only reason. Yeah, it's a child seat, like you said. I thought that was really cool, bringing back an N1 starfighter. Like, it's a ship we haven't seen in a really long time. It's not yellow. They totally sand off all the paint. So like the silver matches Din Djarin's aesthetic. It's a cool Star Wars thing.
For sure.
I enjoyed the fact that like you kind of like get to see this Mandalorian Boba Fett like duel scene, them doing like some dopeness in the finale, doing their thing, and then kind of like Grogu just kind of like saves the day for, you know what I'm saying, with the fact that, I mean, the whole point of the Mandalorian is that they're like, we need to get rid of Grogu because his power with the Force. Right. And it's just like you get to see how strong he really kind of like is. He still saves the day, even in a sense, even if it's only for a little bit. Boba Fett and Mandalorian doing everything they're doing, and then all of a sudden they kind of get overwhelmed. And then he comes in and he's just like, oh, I can save you. And it's just like, man, like it plays more into like how badass he really is as a character, even at such a young age.
Yeah. Oh, he's definitely strong in the Force.
He's been trained up a bit by Luke at this point too, so he's a little bit more ready to go into action, I think. And we do get a really nice callback to season 1, I believe, when Grogu saves him from the creature that I think it's the creature that that he's doing for the Jawas, right? Yeah, that was a nice callback there as well. That leads into another of my favorite moments. Grogu seeing the Mando and just leaping into his arms. Oh,
how
Daddy
can your heart
Mando.
not melt?
Just so sweet. Absolutely wonderful.
I missed you.
I know. And then after he takes down the Rancor, just cuddling up next to him. He's sleepy. They need to rest it off.
It's adorable.
It's very cute. All right, last. Okay, no, yeah, I think that's it for positives. So I'll let you go. Hopefully, I didn't take all of them from you, Chris.
No,
but
not
I
at
do
all.
want to get into negatives as well.
We actually have like totally different moments that stood out to us.
Oh,
so that's
good. Okay,
excellent.
great.
One common moment I will say that aligns with you and Steve is I really do like. I love the Tusken stuff. I really do. You know, the Tusken Raiders have always been portrayed as villainous in the Star Wars universe, and I really appreciate that through the perspective of Boba Fett, we get to spend some time with them and learn more about their culture and really develop them as citizens of the Star Wars universe. You know, we find out a lot about Tatooine, how Tatooine used to be a water-based planet until the oceans dried up. The Tuskens themselves used to inhabit they were the natives. They inhabited this planet while it was covered in water, and they had to adapt themselves once the planet turned into a desert planet, basically. So that's stuff that we had never learned about Tatooine or the Tuskens before, and I really appreciate getting that more intimate look into how they function as a culture on this planet. You know, there are still different groups of Tuskens across Tatooine. I definitely feel like this group was probably a little more honorable than some of the other Tusken groups we've seen. But I really enjoyed that stuff. If the show had just been, you know, Boba Fett crawling out of the Sarlacc pit, getting abducted by the Tuskens, becoming a part of their family, and then maybe Cad Bane coming in earlier in the show, you know, doing something with their relationship, which is a deep and rich relationship in the Star Wars universe that they really don't touch on too much here in the show. There are allusions to it in conversations, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, I would have watched more of the Tuskens, you know?
Same. Yeah.
But they decided to change gears. And I do think I did hear somebody speak on a podcast a couple of days ago about how the Tuskens were essentially fridged for Boba Fett's sake, you know, which kind of sucks. You know, I don't like that. Like the native group is fridged to bolster, and Timor Morrison isn't white, but like, I don't know. There is maybe something problematic there, but I would have loved to spend more time with the Tuskens. I mentioned Cad Bane. I think this is something that's a little polarizing for people.
Fill us in, please. I have no reference point for this character.
In terms of Star Wars moments that just like make you nerd out, right? I'm sure obviously the appearance of Luke Skywalker did that for me. Like the fact that Brian might not agree with me, but the fact that they kind of improved a little bit on the deepfake technology to make it look like a younger Mark Hamill. I'll let Brian get into this when he talks about his dislikes.
How dare you? How dare you?
Set him up.
Seeing Ahsoka Tano and Luke Skywalker interact with one another, considering that Ahsoka was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan. This is an interaction that we've been waiting to see for decades. You know, her talk to Luke, considering that her teacher was Luke's father, Darth Vader. That was a great Star Wars nerd out moment. But the thing that really made me super excited was the standoff between Boba Fett and Cad Bane. For those that are unaware, Jango Fett, Boba Fett's father, and Cad Bane were partners before the Clone Wars. Cad Bane kind of trained under Jango Fett prior to him having a son. And then once Jango Fett passed away or got murdered in Attack of the Clones by Mace Windu, Cad Bane kind of became like the most prominent and badass bounty hunter in the Star Wars galaxy as Boba Fett was growing up. And he eventually ended up training Boba in like all these bounty hunter ways. Okay. There's this deleted scene from Clone Wars that never got made, but it was an episode in which we were supposed to see Boba and Cad Bane basically training together and doing jobs together. And at the very end of the episode, they have a shootout in which Boba ends up shooting Cad Bane in the head, and Cad Bane ends up shooting Boba right in the helmet, and they end up knocking each other out. So this dent in Boba Fett's Beskar helmet is from Cad Bane's gunfire, basically.
Okay.
So this scene at the end of the finale, where Boba Fett's finally having a standoff with Cad Bane, and they have this great interaction where Boba's like, I'm not a boy anymore, and you're an old man. Like, there's a lot of history here. And the fight's really cool because Cad Bane knows all of Boba's tricks. Like, he trained him as a bounty hunter. That's why he kicks his ass to begin with, because like there's no way that Boba's going to take him down with the same tricks that were taught to him by this person, you know? And then it's not until he whips out his Tusken gaffy stick, these techniques that Cad Bane doesn't know that he's learned, that he's finally able to defeat him. And I just thought that was such an awesome moment. And it sucks that everything I just said wasn't anywhere to be seen in this fucking show. Like, it was totally reliant on your knowledge of other Star Wars things. And while I love being a Star Wars fan, I think that's a major flaw for the Star Wars franchise, is that there's so many important things talked about in other media that's like never brought up when it's most crucial. Like when we were talking about the clones during our Mega Quick Hits episode, I mentioned to Brian and Christian that the only reason the clones execute Order 66 is because they have an implant that's put into their brains when they are fetuses, and they are programmed to kill the Jedi. Never mentioned in any of the live action media whatsoever, but it's like this crucial point within the Star Wars mythos. So yeah, that was the scene that totally made me nerd out. As a longtime Star Wars fan, as someone who's consumed all this shit, like I was like, oh, that is badass. But I feel for the people that were like, that just didn't get that. You know, like I said, it was alluded to,
I didn't.
But like, you don't get any of that. And it's just kind of a shame, in my opinion.
You're making it a mission that I must go back. I'm going to watch all of this. I don't know. I'm going to pick a month. And when I do, I'm going to watch all of this from beginning to end. I'm going to watch it in order of release.
Oh my God. I've never even done that, Steve. Let me know how that goes.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to choose a month and do that. But like you said, Cad Bane, I knew a little bit about him.
You saw him in the Bad Batch.
Yeah, in Bad Batch. The thing that I do enjoy and I appreciate it from Book of Boba Fett, because they had showed a lot of Mandalorian. They were showing like in episode 5, 6, and then even in episode 7, where it was a teammate thing, it kind of felt like Mandalorian was taking over the series in a sense. Yeah, and I really appreciate the little thing that they did in having Boba Fett and Cad Bane having their one-on-one and Boba Fett defeating him. Because I for some reason thought it was going to be a tag team thing. And I was just like, it would be okay, I guess, for whatever. But the name of the story, like you guys have alluded to, is Book of Boba Fett. He needs to be the one to defeat him. You know what I'm saying? So that was one of the things that I was kind of worried about as I was watching it. I was like, Mandalorian's going to come save the day, and it'll be a tag team type thing, and it's not going to hit the same. So I really appreciated the fact that they let Boba Fett take him out on his own.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, speaking to that point, that like you were concerned about the Mandalorian kind of stealing the thunder from Boba Fett in the finale. Mm-hmm. I had the same exact concerns. You know, another really fun moment is Boba riding the Rancor. That's just awesome. You know,
I felt like I should have seen it coming and somehow didn't. I felt like a bad watcher at that point. He literally tells Danny
Trejo that he's like, I want to ride it. Like, teach me how to ride it.
It seems so obvious looking back. And once it happened, I was like, oh, blatantly. But yeah, that's a great moment.
I really enjoyed that. But then once Boba gets bucked from the Rancor and he kind of goes crazy, there's this scene where Din Djarin, you know, jetpacks up to the top of the Rancor and tries to ride him. And in that moment, speaking to what Steve was just talking about, I was like, I swear to God, if Din Djarin is able to ride this Rancor, I'm going to turn this off right now. Because like based on what we get in episode 5 and 6, Disney and Lucasfilm are not hiding who their favorite son is. You know, like they clearly want to promote Din Djarin more so than Boba Fett, because Din Djarin is a Disney Star Wars creation. Boba Fett was created by George Lucas. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they tend to bolster all the characters that they themselves have created since the purchase of Lucasfilm. And a lot of the original trilogy characters kind of get put by the wayside. And that's totally on purpose. So yes, I'm very grateful to Jon Favreau that he did not allow Din Djarin to ride the Rancor, because it needed to be a Boba Fett thing. Like Din Djarin, despite being where Boba Fett was 30 years ago within continuity, like just a badass bounty hunter, I feel like he had not earned the right to do something like that. So props to them in that moment, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And we get the Rancor as King Kong, basically, like some explicit, like him climbing the Empire State Building. So I thought that was a nice little shout out for the Rancor too. Definitely.
So do you guys have any more positive things to say about the Book of Boba Fett? Any other things you want to point out?
Nothing specifically. I think the acting performances are pretty solid all around. We haven't really commented on them too much. At times the writing is kind of holding them back, but I think there's no like standout poor performances.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I think everyone was doing good work.
Yeah.
I'm glad Tamora Morrison was able to come back and play Boba Fett in a larger capacity. You know, he's really only done like a couple line dubbings for the special editions for Boba for the original trilogy. So it's nice to get him fully in costume doing it. You know, Ming-Na Wen is consistently amazing in everything that woman does. She is consistently a badass. Like,
I'm going to be honest. I was kind of shipping her and the mod who I can't remember what the line is. Yeah. She kind of like compliments her, and I'm blanking on the line, but I was like, are they going to get together at some point for the future? Maybe.
Possibly. You might have pointed out an Easter egg.
Hey, we'll see.
But yeah, she's consistently awesome. I love everything that woman does in any project that she's in. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of the things that we really, really like about the Book of Boba Fett. Steve, do you have anything, maybe things that you would have changed? You know, obviously we don't like harping on negative things. I know that sounds ridiculous considering how many rants I've gone on over the course of this episode, but don't feel obligated to like point out anything negative if you don't have anything negative that you want to point out. That's all I have to say.
So I'll say that when I was binging it, like I was like, okay, I have a week to binge it. And I watched the first 2 episodes and I was like, oof, you know what I'm saying? I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get through this. And then I ended up falling asleep. And then I ended up going back and I was like, all right, let me start over in the daytime. Cause when you messaged me or whatever, I think it was like 6 or 7. So I was like, oh, okay, let me start now, tonight, right now. You know what I'm saying? So I was kind of late and I had already been drinking, but so I was like, all right, let's start this in the daytime fresh and everything like that. So then I ended up binging the first 4 or 5 episodes the first day. And I was like, okay, this is really good. So I can understand where people that were watching it week to week, where they felt like, okay, this is kind of dragging. It's not, upholding and things like that, where I had a different experience and I got to binge it and things like that. So I didn't have that same experience. Another thing that I did, like one of my complaints is that I felt like, and I don't know if it's necessarily a complaint, but it would be more of a critique. I felt like, much like you guys said, once the Mandalorian stepped on screen, I didn't care as much about Boba Fett. I just didn't. Once Mandalorian stepped on screen, I was like, I need more of that. And then they started bringing Luke Skywalker and Goju in their training and things like that. And I was just like, I care more about this, what's going on. I want more of this than I do about Boba Fett. And I feel like that's not fair to Boba Fett because this is his series. And I feel like you already have enough. It's Star Wars. It's the franchise of Star Wars. You don't have to hook people in by bringing Mandalorian back and things like that.
Yeah, the most marketable character in the last 20 years of Star Wars, Grogu/Baby Yoda. Like, I know you want to sell Baby Yoda merchandise, and I say Baby Yoda jokingly, but like, he doesn't have to be in everything now,
Exactly. And even you know what I'm saying? Until like I was watching the Star Wars, because all the memes still say to this day, Baby Yoda. People that are casuals, they say Baby Yoda. They don't know.
And I mean, I'm not one to talk. Like, I mean, I literally have a 1-to-1 scale Grogu behind me, but like
adorable.
Very dope. But like just watching it, I was like, you don't have to have another selling point. It could be literally Boba Fett the entire time, the entire 6 or 7 episodes. You didn't have to bring in Mandalorian, which I mean, maybe for writing purposes, you felt like you needed to. But I felt like once you brought Mandalorian in, it felt like I didn't really too much to see Boba Fett again, especially after the episode 5 we got, which was just like super intense, the fight action that we got in it. I was like, more, please. I was just
it was awesome.
And so it was just like, I felt like it kind of took away from Boba Fett, the character, in a sense of this is his story, but I care more about the Mandalorian and getting back to that situation. So those are my really big complaints.
And I think that's super valid. And I, you know, based on what we've said over the course of this episode so far, based on all the chatter online, like that aligns with what most people are feeling, you know, like it's kind of a conflicting feeling, because I love those episodes too. I loved episode 5 and 6. They were great Mandalorian episodes. Fantastic. Like that was a great start to Mandalorian season 3.
Yes.
But they were just so out of place. It's tough to like justify their existence in this particular show.
And it's hard to argue when you have nearly 16 episodes of Mandalorian for us to get invested in this character, a single episode. So we basically have 5 episodes total of Boba Fett, and now 19 or 20. So Steve, that's a really good shout out. It makes perfect sense why people are feeling this way.
Yeah. Brian, what about you? What are some of the things that just didn't jive with you?
Well, one of the first things that I'm not sure if it's been brought up before, so maybe correct me if they have, but the drug being called spice when Star Wars is clearly to some extent inspired by.
Not to some extent, Brian. It's
to a large extent inspired by Frank Herbert's Dune.
Yeah.
So we have the Dune Sea, which is the former sea on Tatooine, as well as spice being the drug. And it just felt a little bit too on the nose, just like stealing from Frank Herbert, especially having just seen Denis Villeneuve's Dune, last year.
Yeah.
So that was kind of just like, really? We decided to go that route.
That's also not a new thing, though. I mean, like they've been talking about spice since, the first Star Wars movie. So like, I feel like
I figured
don't
it was
know if
something
George Lucas has ever like explicitly said anything, but people are just aware that Star Wars has kind of blatantly stolen elements from Dune, considering that Dune came out in the 60s and Star Wars came out in 77. So, dude, Tatooine is Arrakis. Like, it's a 1-to-1 almost.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even make that obvious connection there, but yeah, so that was something that just felt a little bit like but
the Tusken Raiders are essentially the Fremen.
Oh,
okay.
Like the natives to the planet.
So that just took me out of it a little bit. Yeah. So that took me out of it a little bit. The Night of 1,000 Tears, literally just Judgment Day in T2, which I was there for. It looked awesome, but I was like, this is just Judgment Day. So that wasn't necessarily a negative because it's some of the best special effects in the show, I think, in those scenes. But again, it was something like, okay, this feels very inspired at best.
Derivative.
And then, derivative at worst. Yeah. The final thing that, again, I have to caveat here with, I saw some of the Twitter discourse around CG Luke coming back. And my God, leave young Luke in the past. Please, dear God, just leave him where he belongs. The CG was, for me, unbelievably weak and took me out of the scenes he was in entirely. And I feel like the show even knows it. We get so much of his dialogue, probably 50% or more is off screen. They know that they can't deliver in the same way that a live action character can. And I get they kind of boxed himself in introducing the CG version of him at the end of Mando season 2. But he's also re-delivering lines that aren't as well written as the stuff that Yoda delivers in Empire. And they're trying to recreate it, and it just felt shoehorned in. It felt like they're trying to redo this thing. It ends up being kind of useless because Grogu makes the choice to leave. And we need Werner Herzog back on set so they don't use goddamn CG Grogu. My God, was it as obvious to you guys as it was to me? Because I didn't hear about Grogu being CG.
I can only think of 2 instances in which he was CG. The rest of the time, he's a puppet.
Yeah, most of the time he was a puppet, but it made it even more obvious when he wasn't. When he's hopping around on the rocks in the river was the one very obvious moment for me. And it made me think of when I was a kid, I enjoyed it, but I understand why people think it's silly. Yoda hopping around in Attack of the Clones.
I will die on this hill. I love that fight. I know you and Christian hate that fight
for it as well,
but I love that fight.
That's fair, and that's totally fine. It's badass. It's undeniably badass. But the CG feels like it hasn't improved that much since then. So
understandable.
Again, it kind of took me out of the verisimilitude of the show. With the puppetry is incredible. It's one of the strongest points of the Mandalorian and Grogu's character, I think. So yeah, I was really disappointed with how all that played out. I texted you guys my reaction to Luke giving Grogu this ultimatum of like being a Jedi or a Mandalorian when we already earlier in the show know that there's characters who are both. Right? Who is the character who is both a Mandalorian and a Jedi?
The creator of the Darksaber. Yes. Oh my gosh, what's his first name? He comes from the Vizsla clan.
Right, because he's the ancestor of the other Mandalorian that we meet. So, but I will say, to that scene's credit, it kind of made me think of, there's this really interesting documentary about how Buddhist monks, the reincarnations of Buddhist monks are found. I think it's not called An Unbearable Child. It's and something child. Mm-hmm. I'll try and remember it for the show notes. A really incredible documentary about a young monk who's tasked with finding the reincarnated version of a former master, and they go through this process of showing them a few items, one of which was owned by the former person. And this is kind of one of the tests that is involved. So I liked that in pulling from these real traditions of these sorts of tests. And the fact that Grogu went back to Mando again, Father Din Djarin is just, I'm always going to be there for that. And I'm glad that, on some level, that he made that decision, but it feels like they were trying to do this. He's going to be the first in Luke's school that he's creating that was introduced in The Last Jedi, right? And that's the same location, right? Or am I misunderstanding that?
So I think it's the same location, but Lucasfilm has been super vague in confirming that.
Okay. But clearly a reference, at least, to the school that he had formed at some point. So I was kind of down for seeing the origin of Luke's training program potentially. And they seem to just kind of cast it off to get him back to Mando. So again, this is where the show is getting a little bit shoehorned, clunky in terms of what they're trying to do. But I did like that ultimatum choice and the fact that Mando sees the chain mail on him. I guess I should have known that it was going to be chainmail, but I was kind of surprised that his giant Beskar spear was put down into something so small. I was like, what the heck is this thing?
I don't know if the armor melted down the entire thing. Okay. I think she may have only melted down the actual like spear portion of it.
They did just show her doing that. Okay. Mm-hmm. That would make a little more sense. But I thought it was sweet ultimately that he made this for him and that he did choose to go back to Papa Mando.
To Brian's point, so do we see, because I haven't seen 789, we don't see Grogu in 789, right?
No.
But I have seen like clips of Mark Hamill as an older Luke in those movies. Right. So I would assume personally that he's not going back to Luke. I feel like he
does not.
He chooses Mandalorian.
You know this already?
Well, technically within the canon, Ben Solo is Luke's first student.
Right. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, there you go.
and I will say this, and I'm about to mention some things that are in like 7, 8, 9, Steve.
That's fine.
But I do kind of appreciate this if we are trying to get from this supreme Jedi Knight Luke, like him at the peak of his powers, to the Luke that we see in The Last Jedi, who's more grizzled and kind of disheartened and broken, and the Jedi religion has been like de-romanticized for him. You know, if we already know that he tried to train Leia and she decided not to be a Jedi, and now he's tried to train Grogu and he's chosen not to be a Jedi, and then he goes to train his nephew and his nephew turns to the dark side. Like, it makes sense that he has all these failures as a Jedi master and teacher, why he would become the person we see him as in The Last Jedi. You know, and
That's
I know,
a good point, Chris. Yeah,
I know that The Last Jedi is super divisive and polarizing, and it's probably the most polarizing thing that's ever existed in Star Wars. And I know it's crazy to say because we spent a decade of people ragging on the prequels, but if they are trying to, like, if Dave Filoni's trying to fix this and do what he did with the prequels with Clone Wars, he kind of flushed out the prequels with the Clone Wars show and made people see the prequels from a different perspective. If he's trying to do the same thing with the sequel trilogy and kind of legitimize the trilogy in some way with all this extra content, I do appreciate and understand like the trajectory that Luke Skywalker is currently on, which is just like a path of failure, constant failure, essentially. You know, which sucks, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, and then in my opinion, so if you have, you know, that Grogu's not going to be in 7, 8, 9, then this is their way of, to Brian's point, you save money with the CGI Luke, because now you don't have to include him in the next Mandalorian season because Grogu's already made the decision.
Right.
I'm going to leave you. And now you don't ever have to show him again. And that saves you money on CGI. That gives you the fan service of seeing Luke and things like that. So that's a possibility. That's just my theory. I don't know because I haven't.
That would make sense, though.
But, Steve, yeah. I hope very deeply that you're right.
And Brian's like 1 out of 100 people that would say that. There are 99 other people out there that are like, more Luke Skywalker. Give me the Luke Skywalker Disney Plus series. I'll watch a whole deep fake series.
I sincerely hope that I haven't pissed off any of our listeners with my opinions here. They are my own, and I think it's subjective. A legitimate
opinion, Brian. And you know, to that point, I just want to mention one more thing. I've already talked about kind of my problems with the show, so I don't want to really harp on it anymore. We've been going for a while, so I also want to get to final thoughts here. But concerning Grogu and Luke and the ending of Mandalorian Season 2, I think that having both Grogu and Luke in the Book of Boba Fett has significantly damaged the ending of Mandalorian Season 2. Because at the end of that show, you expect that Din's going to go on this personal journey now that Grogu is training with Luke Skywalker, and we're going to learn more about his character. He's going to grow as a person now that he's like had this fatherly relationship and had to give it up. Right. So I was assuming that he was going to find something within himself over the course of season 3. And maybe we would cut to Grogu and Luke training over the course of season 3 as well. What I didn't expect, and what I think is terrible writing, is to go back on that decision 2 episodes later. You know, it completely destroys that finale. You know, and that's why I said that I feel like the Book of Boba Fett is like this narrative dumping ground, and that they really wanted to get Din back with Grogu for the beginning of season 3 so they could just start the marketing off strong. You know, they're like, oh, we made a mistake. How do we fix this? And how do we fix it quickly? And it just, I don't know. That's my opinion. I don't know if other people feel that way. But I really like the ending of Mandalorian Season 2. And now these 2 episodes, while they're great, just the fact that Din and Grogu are reunited in the finale of the Book of Boba Fett, I think severely hurts. that season finale. But we'll see.
Fair.
We'll see what happens with Mandalorian season 3. Anyway, we've been going for quite some time. This is definitely the longest episode that Brian and I have had since Christian's been absent. So, Steve, we really appreciate you coming and helping us get back to our normal show length.
Yes, this has been amazing, Steve. I'm so glad we finally got to have you on.
Before we talk about where everybody can find us online, is there anything else that you guys want to say about the Book of Boba Fett? Any final thoughts?
So my opinion, I don't expect to see. I think this one is a limited series, whereas I feel like Mandalorian will have a continuation. I also feel more Mandalorian spinoffs may happen, and they'll just call it the Book of whatever. That way, it'll make the title.
Well, I mean, we already know that there are multiple Mandalorian spinoffs in development. The Ahsoka show is going to be a Mandalorian spinoff.
Oh, right.
So, I mean, this is something that they kind of set out to do from the beginning. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Kathleen Kennedy even said that this was going to be a spinoff. I just think it could have been titled better. You know, that would have fixed it.
Okay.
But Brian, what about you? Any final thoughts?
I think if you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you're going to find stuff to enjoy here. But I think it is probably, in terms of in totality, the weakest of the shows that they've done so far. So I'm still hopeful for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka, and definitely will check them out. But I think your point is valid that this feels a bit like, I can't say it better than narrative dumping ground, something that is a means to an end more so than a self-contained story.
Yeah, I agree with all your sentiments. Despite how long my rants have been about this show, there's a lot of fun to be had here. There's still fun Star Wars things in this show. So like Brian said, I don't really like saying if you're a Star Wars fan anymore, because there's so many different types of Star Wars fans. There's so much Star Wars out there to be consumed. You know, there are people that don't like the prequels that still like the original trilogy. There are people that like the sequel trilogy and there are others that don't. So like, I don't really want to box anybody in. Don't let us yuck your yum if you really enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. I think if you really enjoyed this show, that's great. And I'm really happy for you. I will absolutely revisit this show before I revisit The Rise of Skywalker. So that's a plus.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Brian. I had to say it.
It's okay. It's not unfair.
With that, we're going to close out. Steve, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I really loved having your perspective. You came from such a unique place, and I really appreciate it. Before we close, where can people find you online?
Oh, yes. First of all, thank y'all for having me. I've been a fan. I've recorded with you guys. So meeting you guys and, you know what I'm saying, on Careful for Spoilers, Villains or whatever, it was really dope meeting y'all and everything like that. And then I was just like, I'm already a fan of you guys. So meeting y'all was really dope. So you guys invited me on, and it was totally like, I didn't have any idea that you guys would invite me on. So I'm really, really excited and appreciative that you guys had me on.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Very much.
First and foremost. So thank you guys for that. But you can find me at Scuba Steve 1428. Sorry about the numbers, but I put numbers in the thing. And you can find me on all social media as that. You can follow the Blurred Mind Pod. There's a link tree there, and it'll lead you to all 9 of us. We have Twitch channels and YouTube channels individually and things like that. So you can follow all of those guys. And then you can see me every Friday on Careful for Spoilers with JB, Abe, and Bash, the Council of Villains. And most of the time we have guests, you know, Chris on our show. So, you know what I'm saying? If you guys want to check us out every Friday night, you can check us out. And yeah, man, thank y'all again.
Thank you. Brian, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at True Pop-O-Holic, and you can also find me making terrible jokes in the chats on Fridays for C4S Villains, which I always have a great time watching.
Brian, I expect you to print out that photo you took of episode 6 of The Mandalorian, and I want you to tape it over your album cover for Iron and Wine. So
go like my tweet, folks. Desperate.
That is a really obscure
please.
reference to something that you need to go to Brian's Twitter to understand.
At True Pop-O-Holic. Check it out.
And you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy, comic books, television, movies, video games, collectibles. If it's nerdy, I'm talking about it. And then, of course, you can find Pop-O-Holics here on YouTube, youtube.com/Pop-O-Holics. You can find us on Twitter at Pop-O-Holics, on Instagram at Pop-O-Holicscast. Email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. We love hearing your feedback. We love getting recommendations for things you want us to cover in the future, recommendations for guests you want us to have on the show. If you want to tell us how fucking wrong we are about our Star Wars theories and opinions, email us. We'll read them. We're always grateful for you to take the time and energy out of your day to reach out to us. So thank you. Gentlemen, that's going to do it. Brian, what do we have coming up next week on Pop-O-Holics?
Oh, next week, I believe we are covering Death on the Nile.
Ooh.
This is the newest Kenneth Branagh murder mystery. So definitely excited to check that one out.
I'm ready for it. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on...